According to the United Nations, as of the summer of 2023, more than 8 million Ukrainians remain abroad due to the war. About 3 million people are in Russia and Belarus, including those due to the forced deportation carried out by the Russian Federation in the occupied territories of Ukraine. However, the absolute majority, almost 6 million relocated Ukrainians, are in Western European countries. According to the Office for National Statistics, ONS, last year the migration to the UK rose to a record level for the year from June 2021 to June 2022. The difference between those who arrived and left was 504,000 people. And a third of the new arrivals are citizens of Ukraine. There is no point to deny that the largest wave of refugees on the continent since World War II has put additional pressure on the financial system of European countries, which were already experiencing restrictions due to the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic and the rising cost of living crisis. If we add to this the fact that the majority of Ukrainian refugees are women with children, then the increased load on the education and health system of European countries will also become obvious. According to the IMF, accepting migrants from Ukraine cost the EU about 30 to 37 billion euros. This is more than the total international financial support that Ukraine received from its partners for the whole of 2022. On the other hand, this is only about 0.2% of the GDP of the EU. Or, to be honest, peanuts for the West. And the most interesting part, for the year of the war, Ukrainians managed to turn from a burden into a driver of growth of the European economy. The unexpected migrants from Ukraine paid taxes, relocated businesses, and spent about 2 billion euros per month. The contribution of Ukrainians to the annual GDP growth rate of EU countries is estimated from 0.8 to 1.2 percentage points per year. And this is not the only argument. So, which 5 non-obvious advantages that European economies and citizens received, providing shelter to Ukrainians escaping from the war? My name is Gregor Razubowski, and today I will tell you a little more about whether the Ukrainian case is able to encourage EU and UK citizens to rethink their attitude towards migrants. Having survived the artillery attacks and survived the shock of the forced loss of their homes, Ukrainians found themselves in European countries and began to actively spend the accumulated savings. In March 2022, cash withdrawals from Ukrainian cards in the EU countries reached an enormous 10 billion euros. These expenses of Ukrainian migrants have become a significant support for the economies of the countries that gave shelter to them. According to the National Bank of Ukraine, on average, Ukrainians spend 2 billion euro per month in European countries. This is 3 times more than in 2021. These funds, to some extent, helped avert the risks of a recession in European economies against the background of a general decline in consumption, which in turn was due to the energy crisis, as well as the destabilization and inflation caused by the barbaric war launched by Russia in Ukraine. Having established themselves in new circumstances and new countries of residence, Ukrainian refugees started looking for work and found it. Successful employment was facilitated by the temporary right to work in the EU for Ukrainian refugees. This went and still goes beyond the stipulations of the Geneva Conventions. And in the UK, 40% of Ukrainian refugees from the war were able not only to adapt, receiving the support of the government, but also to get a job. Ukrainians have managed to influence the mitigation of the long-standing crisis of labor capital shortages in the European Union. The geographical and cultural proximity of Ukraine to Europe, the presence of a diaspora, as well as the temporary protection status, stimulated the participation of forced migrants to join the ranks of working people. The Central European Bank is expecting that the participation rate of Ukrainian refugees of working age in the labor force of the Eurozone countries will be from 25% to 55% in the medium-term outlook. At the same time, in 2022, the EU labor force grew by 0.8% or by 1.3 million people. In 2018, researchers from the Stimulation Institute analyzed the economic consequences of labor migration of Ukrainians to Poland from 2013 to 2018. The authors found that the contribution of Ukrainian migrants to the annual Polish GDP growth was 0.5%. This is 13% of Poland's total GDP growth in the period from 2013 to 2018. If 650,000 Ukrainian migrants were to stay in Poland, the labor force would grow by an additional 210,000 people by 2030, and the potential GDP will give an additional gain of 1.2% compared to the basic forecast. In the long term, by 2050, the positive impact will yet increase. Deloitte forecasts are even more optimistic. According to analysts, the integration of Ukrainian forcibly dispersed persons in Poland may lead to an additional increase in Poland's GDP of up to 3.5% per year in the first 5 years. After completing the employment process, many Ukrainians began to contribute to the budgets of their host countries by paying national taxes and fees. If the average migrant to Poland in 2014 to 2017 was a young man with a primary education, in 2022 it was a woman with a higher education, often with children. According to the UNHCR survey, 70% of the surveyed migrants have a higher education. For comparison, in Ukraine before the war, this figure was 29%, and among the EU countries, 33%. As a result, migration encourages other segments of the labor market. Instead of physical labor, jobs in the service sector are in greater demand, in particular part-time jobs with fewer night shifts. New migrants settled mainly in cities and looking for work in a wide range of economic sectors. Poland has provided Ukrainians with almost 1.5 million temporary protection statuses and has already received a positive effect from this. For example, according to the Center of Migration Research at the University of Warsaw, employed Ukrainians in Poland have already paid 10 billion zloty, about 2.4 billion euro, in taxes. This exceeds the amount of support provided, although these amounts do not take into account the cost of education and healthcare. According to international estimates, more than half of those who have received temporary protection have jobs in Poland, and according to Polish research centers, even 3/4. According to officials, 420,000 of the Ukrainian migrants found work in 3 main industries: in construction, IT, and retail. According to the European Investment Bank, the full-scale Russian war against Ukraine has stimulated 1.1% reduction in real private consumption in the EU, primarily in the countries of Central Eastern and Southeastern Europe. However, the expenses of Ukrainian migrants correlated with this forecast. The presence of additional clients stimulated consumer markets in European countries. In early 2022, Ukrainian migrants even led to a splash in retail trade and private consumption in Poland and Estonia. However, the situation later stabilized. Having spent their financial pillars, Ukrainians use the opportunities of local governments. The financial support received was also spent on domestic markets, boosting their growth. The largest volumes of transactions in retail chains using Ukrainian cards were carried out in Poland, 28% of the total volume, and in Germany, 10%. In particular, analysts of the Crédit Agricole Bank identified the influx of migrants from Ukraine as the main driver of speeding up retail sales in Poland in March 2022. In particular, there was a noticeable increase in sales in the clothing and footwear categories, 41.9% versus 2.6% in February. Furniture, electronics and home appliances were 44% compared to 2.8% in February. In general, in the host countries, Ukrainians also actively spent their own funds on housing, healthcare and education, taking into account a significant share of children among migrants, 28% to 44% in different countries. Financiers think that this compensated the negative impact of inflation and the decline of consumer attitude on household spending. A similar situation has developed in Estonia. According to the forecast, based on the estimates from the IMF research due to the contribution of Ukrainian migrants, the output of goods and services in Estonia, Poland and the Czech Republic in 2026 will be 2.3% higher than in the baseline scenario without migration. In Germany, by 0.65%. According to a report by the Polish Economic Institute, Ukrainians formed 45% of all new foreign companies that opened their representative offices in Poland last year. Citizens of Ukraine registered 10,200 private enterprises and 3,600 companies with Ukrainian capital in this country in the period from January to September 2022. The vast majority of 41% of new business in Poland were founded by Ukrainian women. The share of Ukrainian companies in the total mass of new enterprises in Poland increased to 8.5% in September, compared with less than 1% before the war began. The number of individual enterprises created by Ukrainian citizens in 2022 grew geometrically from month to month. The biggest jump was in the first weeks after the start of the Russian invasion in April 2022. There were already 4.5 times more such companies on the Polish market than in January. And in September, 2.6 times more than in April. The sectors were dominated by construction, information and communications, and services, says analyst Anna Szymanska. More than 50% of companies that registered in Poland did so to relocate or recover business that they carried on in Ukraine. About two-thirds said they intend to remain in the Polish market after the end of the war. In total, Poland currently has 24,100 companies with Ukrainian capital, which is as much as 25% of the total number of all enterprises with foreign capital. In 1 year of war, more than 11% of Ukrainian enterprises were relocated to the EU countries. Another 17% partially relocated their business within Ukraine. 63% of businesses moved to Poland and 25% to Germany. Popular countries were Belgium, Bulgaria and Estonia. A story of success, even if the circumstances are rather bitter. This is the power of reason. Always remember that our true power lies in rational thought and a clear mind when we're threatened with the daily flow of disinformation and the manipulation of news. So please do the reasonable thing and start following our project right now.